Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Greg Morelli. I'm 44, and until recently, I was executive chef at Emberline, a once beloved, high-end restaurant tucked away in Portland's Arts District. For 8 years, I was the soul of that kitchen. And I don't say that with arrogance. I say it with the weariness of someone who gave everything to something that was never truly his. I built Emberline with my hands. Not the walls or the paint, but the flavor, the identity. Before me, it was a ghost town of mediocrity, just another overpriced spot serving forgettable meals to business clients. I turned it into something people made reservations months in advance for. Something sacred. But sacred doesn't survive ownership changes. 3 weeks ago, a woman named Vanessa Langford, some Silicon Valley tech investor turned restaurateur, bought Emberline from the quiet owner, Harold. She came in like a storm of buzzwords. Disruption, modernization, Instagrammable. She had a background in venture capital and a following of lifestyle influencers who treated food like fashion. To her, my menu was too heavy, too traditional, too sincere. That Tuesday, she called me into her office, didn't even look up from her MacBook. "Greg, your food is beautiful, but it's not where I want to take Emberline. We need fusion, surprise, visual flair. Think foam, think color, think avocado chimichurri ice cream." I stood there, silently. Then she added, "You'll stay on for 2 weeks to transition. We'll need all your recipes documented." I nodded. Once. Not a word. Just that. She blinked, surprised. Like she expected me to beg. But I don't beg for people who don't understand what they're killing. What she didn't know was that none of my real recipes were written down, not the real versions, the ones that mattered. You can't write down intuition. You can't train someone to know when the sauce needs a whisper more of citrus because of the weather outside. That kind of cooking lives in your bones. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat at the bar of my own restaurant with a glass of bourbon and felt something break open in my chest. Not sadness. Not anger. Something sharper. The next morning, I started packing my personal knives. My sous chef, Tamara, found me in the walk-in fridge and froze. "Chef," she said. "What's going on?" "She wants new blood," I replied. Apparently authenticity doesn't trend anymore. Her mouth fell open. "But you are Emberline." I shrugged. "Not anymore." But deep down, I knew something she didn't. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The morning after my final service at Emberline, I woke to silence. No prep list. No emails from vendors. No clatter of pans. No fire to tend. Just the slow, cruel realization that I had nothing. No job. No kitchen. No purpose. I wandered my apartment like a ghost, barefoot, in sweatpants. My knives lay rolled up on the counter. My chef's jacket still hung on the back of the kitchen chair. And I couldn't bring myself to touch either. For the first time in almost a decade, I didn't know what to cook. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from Tamara, from Marcus on the grill line, even from some of our regulars who had heard rumors. But I let them sit unanswered. I wasn't ready to talk. Because if I did, I might break. Emberline had been my cathedral. I'd baptized it with sweat, and bled into every dish. I made food that carried stories, my nana's veal marsala, my mother's orange zest polenta cake, my own rosemary duck that once made a New York Times critic tear up at table 9. And now it was all gone. 3 days passed like that. I didn't eat. Barely slept. I kept checking social media out of morbid curiosity. And sure enough, Vanessa had wasted no time. The restaurant had already begun rebranding under her direction. They were calling it Emberline, Reborn. She even posted a teaser video, flashing lights, techno music, some smug-looking guy in oversized glasses standing behind my old pass like he belonged there. Meet Chef Diego, the caption read. Former head of culinary concept design at Frost Lab LA. Frost Lab. A place where they served cocktails in test tubes and soup that looked like shaved ice. I wanted to vomit. The comments were mixed. Some curious. Some excited. But a handful of loyal patrons asked the question I didn't dare answer. Where's Chef Greg? Please tell me the duck's still on the menu. This better not mean the end of that saffron risotto. I couldn't bring myself to reply. Let them find out on their own. That Friday, I finally left my apartment. I had no plan. I just started walking. Portland was misty, the kind of gray that makes your skin feel damp even when it's not raining. I wandered past the farmer's market, where I used to source all my seasonal produce. Past the fishmonger who used to set aside scallops just for me. I nodded at him out of habit. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I wasn't Chef Greg anymore. I ended up downtown, standing in front of an old boarded-up storefront. The faded sign above the door read, M. Morelli and Sons, Italian fare since 1951. It was my grandfather's place. Once a bustling trattoria, now just a forgotten shell. I stared at the locked door, my reflection flickering in the dirty glass. For a second, I saw my grandfather behind me, his apron stained with tomato, his forearms dusted with flour. Don't chase money, he used to say. Chase the soul of the food. The rest will follow. But that world didn't exist anymore. Now it was all influencers and foam and elevated street food. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. On the wall, beside the door, was a small plaque I'd never noticed before. Rusted, but still legible. The food remembers, even when people forget. It was his quote. The one he used to write on every order slip when I was a kid working summers in his kitchen. I reached out and ran my fingers across the words. For the first time in days, I felt something stir in my chest. Not hope exactly. But maybe the ghost of it. When I got home, Tamara was sitting on my stoop. I tried calling, she said softly. I unlocked the door and gestured her inside. She didn't speak at first. Just looked around the place like she was stepping into a sacred space. They're butchering it, she finally said. Greg. Emberline's falling apart. My throat tightened. It's not my place anymore. She looked at me hard. No. But they're using your name. Your reputation. Your dishes. They didn't even change the menu yet. Just the chef. That hit me in a different way. She wasn't just telling me the food had changed. She was telling me they were serving my creations without me. Ruining them. Selling them under my legacy. I felt the room tilt slightly. Then she added, a couple of the regulars walked out last night. The risotto came out gummy. The duck was dry. And Diego had the nerve to tell the staff, just played it pretty. They won't know the difference. My jaw clenched. They know the difference. You could open your own place, she said. I scoffed. With what money? I'd follow you, she said quietly. So would Marcus and Lily. Half the team is already miserable. Emberline isn't Emberline without you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. But something was changing. Underneath the despair, something was starting to flicker. A spark. A need. Not just for redemption. For revenge. A few days later, I walked back to the old Morelli trattoria. I didn't know why, habit, maybe. Or nostalgia. But something about that rusted plaque wouldn't let go of me. The food remembers, even when people forget. I stood in the drizzle, staring at the windows covered in newspaper. The inside looked untouched since the 90s, peeling linoleum, a dusty espresso machine, and a warped wooden counter. But something about it felt alive. A memory surfaced. My grandfather, Massimo Morelli, singing to the tomatoes as he crushed them by hand for Sunday sauce. He used to say, "Food hears you, Gregorio. Be kind when you cook." He died when I was 17. Left the building to my father, who never did anything with it. Too many ghosts. I hadn't thought about that place in years. But that morning, standing in front of it, I had a sudden thought. What if this wasn't over? What if this was where it began again? The idea scared me more than Vanessa ever had. That night, I started digging through old boxes in my closet. Somewhere, I knew I had my grandfather's original leather-bound recipe journal, the one he used behind the line. My father had given it to me before we stopped talking. I found it wrapped in an old apron. The first page was his handwriting, strong, looping script. If you forget the flavor of home, you forget who you are. Page after page was filled with rustic, beautiful simplicity. Cavatelli with fennel sausage. Braised rabbit with white wine. And tucked into the back, scribbled notes on how to adjust ingredients based on weather, season, or mood. But that wasn't the discovery. The discovery came when I noticed an envelope stuck between the back pages. Yellowed with age, addressed to me. For Greg, when he's ready. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single handwritten page, dated 2 months before my grandfather died. Gregorio. If you're reading this, then you've tasted enough life to know what matters. I never cared about Michelin stars or food critics. I cared about people who closed their eyes after a bite. One day, someone will try to use your passion. They'll strip it down, sell it, call it theirs. That's when you'll have to decide, do you let them win, or do you remember who you are? The building is yours. Do something with it. Something real. With love. No. I sat there for hours, reading that letter over and over again. Vanessa had stripped my name off Emberline's walls, but she couldn't erase what lived in my blood. And then came the real twist. The next morning, Tamara showed up at my apartment again, this time with something in her hands. A flash drive. I thought you should see this, she said. I plugged it in. It was a screen recording, taken on a phone, of an internal Emberline Zoom meeting. Tamara had been invited accidentally. On the screen, Vanessa. Chef Diego. A marketing consultant. And someone I recognized, Colin Rice, a private equity investor known for flipping hospitality businesses. Let's be clear, Colin was saying. You promised me Emberline had sustainability as an identity. That it had critical acclaim, a strong legacy chef, and a cult following. Vanessa nodded. We still do. The core recipes are his. Are you planning to keep using his name in press releases? Colin asked. She hesitated. Then Diego cut in. We don't need his name. We'll build a new identity off his work. Guests don't care who's in the kitchen, just the vibe. Vanessa added, Greg's out. He won't fight us. He's old school. This city moves fast. By the time he tries anything, we'll be too big to stop. The meeting ended with laughter. My heart was pounding. They hadn't just fired me. They had stolen from me. And they thought I wouldn't notice. But they were wrong. Very, very wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger, though God knows it burned in me like an open flame, but because for the first time in weeks, I had clarity. Vanessa hadn't just underestimated me. She'd forgotten something critical. I don't make food for followers. I make food that remembers. She could imitate my dishes, steal my kitchen, even try to rewrite the story of Emberline, but the soul of that place. That belonged to me. Always had. Now it was time to take it back. But not by going to war the way she'd expect. Not with lawsuits or press scandals. No. I would do the one thing she couldn't compete with. Create something real. The next morning, I called Tamara, Marcus, and Lily and asked them to meet me at the old Morelli trattoria. They showed up, skeptical, staring at the worn-down sign and broken awning. "You serious?" Marcus asked. "This place looks haunted." "Exactly," I said. "It has a story." I unlocked the door. The inside was worse than I remembered, musty, water-damaged, with peeling wallpaper and a leaking faucet. But I didn't see decay. I saw potential. Tamara walked behind the old bar and found the espresso machine. "Does this still work?" "Not yet. But we will." That afternoon, I drafted a business plan, not flashy, but solid. I wasn't building a vanity project. I was building a legacy. I reached out to my cousin Leah, a former accountant who now helped small restaurants get off the ground. "This is a crazy idea," she said after reviewing it. "But it's beautiful. And you're not the first chef they've chewed up and spit out." Then she added, "You'll need capital. Do you have anything to invest?" I didn't. But that night, I made a decision that would have made my father explode. I sold the classic Ducati motorcycle he left me in his will. It was the last gift he ever gave me. But it was just a machine. This dream. This was blood. Within a week, we'd secured a small bank loan using the property deed, my grandfather's old gift, as collateral. I called in every favor I had. An old friend from culinary school who now owned a tile company agreed to redo the kitchen floors at cost. A former dishwasher who'd become a carpenter offered to build our tables from reclaimed wood, for free, just to be part of it. And slowly, piece by piece, the heart of Morelli's began to beat again. We didn't call it a restaurant. We called it Morelli's Table. 12 seats. No reservations. No gimmicks. Just real food, cooked right. But here's where the revenge part took root. I started leaking whispers to a few food writers I trusted, people who had supported me during Emberline's rise. I didn't trash Vanessa. I didn't have to. I just told the truth. That I was cooking again. That I was going back to the roots my grandfather gave me. That the recipes people had fallen in love with weren't gone, they just had a new home. And slowly, the city began to hum. 2 weeks before Emberline's relaunch party, Tamara showed me an Instagram post from one of their influencer partners. "Join us at the new Emberline," it read, "where the classics you love return, elevated, reimagined, reborn." The comments? "Please tell me Chef Greg is involved. Not interested unless the OG is back. Stop messing with perfection." Vanessa responded to none of them. But I knew she was watching. How? Because 3 days later, I got a call. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then played it back on speaker, with Tamara and Marcus listening. "Greg, it's Vanessa. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd love to talk. About collaboration. About possibilities. Call me." I didn't call back. Instead, I had Ellie, our old pastry chef, bake her famous lemon crostata and deliver it anonymously to Emberline. No note. Just a perfect, golden slice. The message was clear. We're still here. And we're better than ever. That night, I opened my grandfather's recipe journal and added a new note in the margins. "The kitchen is sacred. Guard it with your life." Because I knew what Vanessa didn't. You can't fake soul. And soon, everyone would see that for themselves. The night before we opened Morelli's Table, I stood in the dining room long after everyone else had gone home. It wasn't much. 12 seats. Reclaimed wood tables hand-oiled by Marcus. Soft light fixtures that Tamara found at a vintage shop. On each table sat a folded cloth napkin, a single wine glass, and a small card that read, "Welcome home." I walked into the kitchen and ran my fingers along the counter. The old copper pots, my grandfather's, hung above the stove, polished and gleaming. On the far wall, I'd framed the plaque from outside the building. "The food remembers, even when people forget." Opening night sold out before we ever made an announcement. How? Word of mouth. A single post on Ellie's Instagram, "The real Emmerlein isn't dead, it's just moved." That caption did more damage to Vanessa than 1,000 reviews ever could. The first guests that walked through the door. Two elderly women who used to come to Emberline every Thursday night. When they saw me behind the pass, one of them teared up. "You don't know what it means to have this again," she said. "We've been lost since you left." I didn't say anything. Just handed her a plate of saffron risotto, made exactly as I used to. No foam. No edible flowers. Just love. That night, I cooked every dish myself. Ellie ran the dessert station. Marcus worked the line. Tamara floated between expediting and tableside wine pairing. We served only 5 appetizers, 5 entrees, and 3 desserts. But every plate came back clean. Every table left in silence, because they were full in a way Instagram could never capture. Meanwhile, across town, Emberline was unraveling. We didn't have to wait for rumors. The staff still inside were feeding us intel daily. Chef Diego was overwhelmed. The press had caught wind that he wasn't the original creator of the menu. That Vanessa was rebranding without substance. That the new Emberline was just a shadow trying to wear someone else's coat. Then came the critical blow. A review in the Portland Herald. Emberline has lost its voice. What was once soulful, intimate cuisine is now a sterile imitation of better days. The heart is gone. The hands behind the food are gone. And then, one line that made my phone light up all night. "If you're looking for the real Emberline, try the little 12-seat spot in Old Town run by a man named Greg Morelli." Vanessa tried damage control. She posted a tone-deaf reel of Diego torching an octopus tentacle under blue strobe lights, smiling like he'd invented food itself. Comments were brutal. "This ain't it. We want flavor, not fireworks. Give Greg his kitchen back." And then someone leaked the clip Tamara had recorded, the Zoom call where Vanessa and her investors bragged about riding my name to a quick flip. It went viral. That night, my inbox exploded with interview requests from local press, food bloggers, even a few national outlets. But I didn't respond. I didn't need headlines. The food was speaking for itself. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. 1 week after our opening, I received a manila envelope at the restaurant. Inside, a cease and desist letter. Vanessa was accusing me of violating a non-compete clause in my original Emberline contract. According to her lawyers, Morelli's table was a direct competitor within a 5-mile radius, profiting from proprietary culinary identity. I read the letter 3 times. Then passed it to my cousin Leah. She smirked. "You're fine," she said. "Your menu is based on your grandfather's original recipes. Traditional Italian. Emberline is supposedly modern fusion. And even that's falling apart. This is a scare tactic." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. The next night, after dinner service, I stepped outside for some air. And there she was. Vanessa. Leaning against a black SUV like she owned the street. She looked thinner, sharper, like someone running on desperation and coffee. "Greg," she said smoothly, "can we talk?" I didn't answer. Just crossed my arms. "You win," she said. I blinked. "What?" She stepped closer, voice low. "The investors are pulling out. The press is killing us. That video didn't help. I stayed silent. I want to make you an offer. You come back. Full creative control. Equity. Public apology. Emberline becomes your brand again. Just save it before it's gone. There it was. The crack in her armor. The same woman who tossed me aside like spoiled garnish now begging for help. I looked her in the eye and gave her the only answer that felt right. I already saved it, I said. You're just looking in the wrong kitchen. Then I turned and walked back inside. I thought the cease and desist letter was a bluff. I thought Vanessa had made her last move. I was wrong. 3 days later, my cousin Leah stormed into Morelli's table holding a thick manila folder. "Greg," she said, eyes wide, "we have a problem." Inside were fresh filings. Vanessa wasn't just bluffing anymore. She was suing me. The official complaint accused me of breach of non-compete clause, misappropriation of culinary intellectual property, brand dilution and market sabotage. She wanted damages, a forced shutdown of Morelli's table, and, get this, a public retraction of all implied association with the original Emberline brand. Leah tossed the documents onto the counter, fuming. "This isn't about legal grounds. She's trying to bleed you dry with legal fees." Tamara looked like she was ready to throw a plate through the wall. "She can't be serious. Half the city knows she stole Greg's recipes." But I wasn't surprised. Desperate people do desperate things. And Vanessa Langford was desperate. That night, I sat alone in the back office of the restaurant. The walls around me were filled with handwritten menus, wine notes, and my grandfather's framed recipe cards. I took a breath and picked up the phone. I called my father. We hadn't spoken in years, not since I dropped out of architecture school to become a chef. I half expected him to hang up. He didn't. "Greg," he said, voice cracked with age. "I need your help." There was a pause. "Then, I heard you opened Nono's place." "I did." Another pause. "He'd be proud." I told him about the lawsuit. About Vanessa. About everything. And for the first time in my life, my father said something I never expected. I kept the original lease documents. From 1951. The restaurant was zoned for a private culinary school. That clause never got updated. I froze. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "you're not technically running a competing restaurant, if you position Morelli's table as a teaching kitchen. A heritage preservation program." Boom. That changed everything. I immediately called Leah. She reviewed the lease and nearly dropped her coffee. "This is your out," she said. "Refile as a culinary arts preservation space. Same food, same service, but legally it falls under education. She can't touch that." We worked through the night, rebranding Morelli's table as Morelli's Table, a heritage kitchen and culinary workshop. Preserving traditional Italian cuisine, one plate at a time. We even printed new menus with an intro paragraph about education, legacy, and continuing the cultural tradition of Southern Italian cooking through immersive guest experiences. Was it a little theatrical? Sure. Was it legally bulletproof? Absolutely. But then, the twist I didn't see coming. It came from inside Emberline. A week before Vanessa's court filing was due to be heard, Ellie, our pastry chef, received an anonymous email. It contained a full spreadsheet of Emberline's internal financials. Vendor kickbacks. Inflated supply costs. Shell company transfers. Vanessa hadn't just been bleeding Emberline dry. She'd been cooking the books. My phone buzzed. A blocked number. Again. I let it ring. This time, there was a voicemail. "Greg. You need to call me. Now. Please." But I didn't. I forwarded the spreadsheet to Leah and then to a reporter from the Portland Herald, the same one who'd written the scathing review of Emberline weeks earlier. By morning, the story had exploded. Emberline's fall, financial fraud allegations emerge against owner Vanessa Langford. Within 48 hours. Investors pulled out. Staff began quitting en masse. The health department announced a surprise inspection. And most importantly, Vanessa withdrew her lawsuit. Her empire had collapsed faster than her mousse-based appetizers. That Friday night, Morelli's table was busier than ever. We'd just expanded to 18 seats and still had a waitlist 2 weeks out. But something shifted in me that night. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't victory. It was freedom. Vanessa had tried to erase me. But in doing so, she amplified me instead. She reminded the world where the soul of Emberline truly lived. And now, it was time to reclaim the rest. 6 months after Morelli's table opened its doors, I walked past the old Emberline building. The windows were dark. The patio furniture had been removed. A for lease sign hung crooked in the front window like a white flag of surrender. Vanessa Langford was gone. After the financial scandal broke, her investors sued for misrepresentation. She tried to settle, but they came for everything. The last I heard, she'd quietly left Portland, her hospitality career in ruins. No one in the restaurant world would touch her now. Too much baggage. Too little integrity. I didn't rejoice. I didn't gloat. Because by then, I understood something deeper. The best revenge isn't vengeance. It's resurrection. Morelli's table had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We'd expanded into the space next door, my grandfather's original dining room. Renovated from floor to ceiling with care and reverence. The copper pot still hung proudly above the line. We kept the original stove and even restored the wood-fired oven. The sign out front read: Morelli's Table, EST 1951. Reborn 2023. We never advertised. We never chased trends. And yet, reservations were booked out 3 months in advance. We'd been featured in national magazines, called The Soul of Portland Dining, and A Love Letter to Authenticity. But the real joy came in quiet moments. Like the night Mrs. Redmond, one of my old Emberline regulars, came in with her granddaughter. She cried over the first bite of braised lamb. Or when a young culinary student approached me after dinner, clutching her notebook, and asked, "How do you know when a dish is done?" I smiled. When it tastes like a memory. Then, one night, something happened I'll never forget. Tamara handed me a note folded in half. "Guy at table 4 asked me to give you this." I opened it. Inside was a name I hadn't seen in years. Harold Brenner, the original owner of Emberline. I walked to his table, and there he was, thinner now, older, but unmistakable. He stood and gave me a warm, tired smile. "You saved it," he said softly. "Saved what?" I asked. "The part of Emberline that mattered," he replied. "I never knew how much of that place was you until you were gone. And I'm sorry I didn't fight harder when I sold it." I sat with him. We talked about food. About memory. About the way restaurants are like people, they can lose themselves chasing something that was never real. Before he left, he pulled something from his coat pocket. An envelope. "I kept this," he said. Didn't know why. Maybe for this moment. Inside was a check, not much. A symbolic amount. "Consider it seed money for your next chapter," he said. "You reminded the city what real food is." A year to the day after I walked out of Emberline, Morelli's Table held a private dinner. Friends. Former staff. Family. Regulars who'd followed me from the beginning. During dessert, Ellie's legendary lemon crostata, I stood and raised a glass. "To food that remembers," I said. "And to the hands that make it honest." People clinked glasses. There were tears, laughter, and that unique silence that happens only after a perfect meal. And then I noticed someone standing quietly in the doorway. My father. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year, not since he gave me the original deed and disappeared back to California. He walked in, looked around, and simply said, "You rebuilt the family." I nodded. He stepped forward, handed me a small wooden box, and said, "Your grandfather left this." I didn't know what it was until recently. Inside was a single item. A key. To the vineyard. The one my grandfather had tended in southern Campania. The one he used to say he'd return to, when the time was right. I stared at it for a long time. And suddenly, I knew. My journey wasn't ending. It was just beginning again. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.